When getting into a long-running franchise, it can be hard to experience everything it has to offer. Take the Mario series as an example. This shit basically started in the Stone Age, aka the time before 1983. And there are about 60,000 Mario games in existence, ranging from platformers to RPGs to racing games. There's puzzle games, sports games, horror games, games that teach you typing, games that teach you how to party, and even a game that teaches you how to manage a hotel. And I tell you what, not a job I'd want right now. Then you look over at Mario's counterpart, the Zelda series, and while there's not nearly as much going on, there's still quite a lot of content to go through. I mean, I first got into the series in 2013, and I still haven't played them all. I started with Ocarina of Time, then completed Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and about an hour of Skyward Sword before I went backwards again, and I'm still missing some games. I've barely played Links to the Past, the Oracle games are basically foreign entities to me, and up until recently, I'd almost forgotten that the Legend of Zelda, the Minish Cap, even existed. I just never heard it talked about. I'd seen strong critical reception, but I always take that with a grain of salt because we all know how game critics can be. So I kept pushing it off. And you know what? It's a damn shame because Minish Cap is fucking awesome. I don't want to say it's underrated because I feel like that word gets thrown around in situations where it's uncalled for. No, Nancy, the McDonald's Filet-O-Fish isn't underrated. You just thought you ordered a McChicken and were surprised that the questionable fish product and questionable chicken product tasted the same. I do, however, believe that the Minish Cap is underappreciated. People know it's a good game, but I really want to make a point that Minish Cap is a top 5 Zelda game, right up there with the big boys. And to do that, I'll need to take you through my Minish Cap journey. Enjoy. I awoke to the sound of the front door opening and the yelling of my dad, uncle, cousin? I don't really know. Anyways, I awoke to yelling from my dad, uncle, cousin, and I sprang out of bed. I, of course, being the great warrior and hero, Bumbles. But of course, I did not yet know of the events that would transpire on that fateful day. The day when I lost everything. Okay, well, not really. The opening to Minish Cap's story is pretty straightforward. You escort Zelda around a festival until the award ceremony for the winner of the swordsmanship competition takes place in Hyrule Castle. Turns out the guy who won it is an evil douchebag who destroys the ancient Picori blade that the winner of the competition is allowed to touch. For some reason. He turns Zelda to stone and yeets out of there, and now you gotta go save her. It's pretty pedestrian for a plot opening, but it gets the job done. I like that the villain, Vadi, comes in and straight up wrecks everyone, including you, with seemingly no resistance. Knowing that there's that big of a threat looming over you constantly is something that will give you a genuine sense of anxiety throughout your playthrough, and it's always nice to see Link have an interaction with the villain early on. So, Zelda's turned to stone. Now what? Well, by the official decree of the king, let's give the 8-year-old a sword and let him figure it out. You're going to find that Minish Cap emphasizes exploration a lot. There's basically zero hand-holding here. Figure it out yourself, dingus. The closest thing to it would be Eslo, and although he will give you small hints about what to do next, he'll mostly just tell you to fuck off and figure it out for yourself. Oftentimes, the way forward will only be revealed once you've thoroughly explored an area. When you play this game, you're going to want to keep a close eye on every nook and cranny of your surroundings, and that's not an exaggeration, since you have the ability to become the size of a pea. This is due to the premise of Minish Cap, the legend of the Picori, a race of tiny magic people who live in trees and bake cookies. The Picori, or as they prefer, the Minish, can only be seen by animals and children, which is why Bumbles here has to do everything himself. The first order of business is to head to the Minish forest to meet these tiny bastards. Of course, we can't even do that because we can't even get small even. But conveniently, there's a magical green talking bird hat thing in the forest that can turn us small. I feel like that sentence could also be said by someone tripping on acid. I mentioned him before, but this hat guy is Eslo, and he's one of my favorite characters in any game, ever. I think it mainly has to do with the fact that he's as sarcastic as I am. Eslo introduces us to the shrinking aspect of the game, which allows us to access all of the different Picori areas throughout Hyrule, which opens up a bevy of new areas to explore. I guess you could say Eslo is a Minish Cap. No, but that's actually why it's called that. in case you couldn't tell. But it's not just because he's a cap that can make you small. Turns out he's actually a Minish himself. A sorcerer, in fact. Wait, so if you're actually a Minish, then what part of you is stretched over my head right now? You know what, on second thought, I don't really want to know. But what are we even exploring in Minish Cap? Well, this version of Hyrule functions a little bit differently than some other games in the series. Instead of having large areas to visit, Minish Cap's overworld is sectioned off into smaller segments, and each of those segments can be returned to and explored more thoroughly as you progress, mostly with the use of new items. A good example of this would be the Mole Mitts, which allows you to dig into walls to find hidden treasure, and these walls are in every section of Hyrule. Not only is it cool to find more unique areas within these sections, it also makes items more useful outside of their respective dungeons. That's a big positive, because as much as we all love the spinner and the hover boots, they're basically just filling an item slot once you leave the dungeon you got them in. There's also quite a few items that have multiple uses, like the Gust Jar being able to suck in enemies and blow out air, the Cane of Pakai's ability to flip over enemies, platforms, and hell, even Link himself, and both Rock's Cape and the Pegasus Boots can be linked with sword combat. Speaking of which, Bumbles here packs some serious heat in this game. In terms of versatility, his swordplay ranks highly in the Zelda series. Of course, he's got basic sword slashing, but through the use of Tiger Scrolls given to him by the Blade Brothers, he can learn a bunch of useful abilities like the downward thrust and the ultimate spin attack, and he doesn't even need any formal training either. Just a little possession training from the Blade Boys, where they take control of his body and perform the technique for him, because that teaching method surely wouldn't be awkward or anything. Dungeons. We all know them. We all have them underneath our houses. And the dungeons in Minish Cap are a damn good time. Deepwood Shrine. This dungeon blows. Nah, but it's actually fun. I really like the boss fight in this one because it was the first time you get to see big changes on how the game works when you enter Minish form. The boss of this temple is a green choo-choo. Normally you just kick those out of your way and get on with your life, but now, this dude is giant. We can't even attack him without knocking him down first. Cave of Flames. This dungeon was formerly used as a mine before all the monsters took over, so there are a bunch of minecarts to ride in. This must be what the humans who built this mine got around with. Maybe we should hop in? Sure, that doesn't sound too bad. I've made a horrible mistake. Well, that wasn't so bad. Fortress of Winds. This dungeon is cool because the Mole Mitts allow you to make your own path through all these dirt areas. Also, the boss fight against the dude from Wind Waker utilizes both forms Link can take, and multiple items. Temple of Droplets. This is probably my favorite dungeon in the game because it plays a little different than normal Zelda dungeons. You actually get the boss key through an ice block puzzle right in the beginning of the dungeon, and the majority of the dungeon is actually in the boss room. The element you're looking for and the boss of the temple are both in this main room, but you have to unfreeze them. The dungeon item is the lantern, which isn't anything amazing, but it does help you to progress through the dark areas of the dungeon, which Ezlo kindly reminds you of. Watch your step! I don't want you to trip over anything. And what do I do immediately after that? Instantly fall. That's a reference. Palace of Winds. The Palace of Winds is a giant temple in the sky, which gives it a more open feeling as opposed to most Zelda dungeons. And you can fly. Whee! The openness of the Palace of Winds does bring about one small issue, being that you're going to be plummeting towards the ground more times than you'd like. There are plenty of opportunities to fall out of it, and I did so countless times. Another thing you can do is force enemies to jump out of the temple.
To their deaths.
Sans! No! And finally, Dark Hyrule Castle. This dungeon is super combat heavy, and it will really test your abilities. I had 19 heart containers, every sword skill, and almost every item upgrade, and I still died a few times. There's a section of this dungeon where you have to collect 4 keys, and all of them are guarded by Dark Nuts, who are by far the most difficult enemy in this game, and it's a serious challenge to beat them all in one go. Either that or I just suck. Probably both. I definitely felt like I did during the final boss. Vaati has 3 forms, and I died at least once during each of them, which actually brings me to my first negative of the video, which was the fact that you get sent back to the beginning of the dungeon no matter where in the boss fight you die, and you have to play through each phase and the intro segment and go through the boss dialogue all over again, and that was just kind of a waste of time. But, on a positive note, the build up to this battle is actually spectacular. You feel like you have a time limit because Zelda is about to be turned to stone forever, and just as you reach her, Vaati drops you down lower in the castle, and it's go time. As I've gotten older, stuff like atmosphere and world building have become more important to me, and this is something Minish Cap excels at. Hyrule is connected through the Minish and their Kinstone pieces. Kinstone merging is a great feature in a few different ways, as it can unlock hidden secrets, chests, pathways, items, etc. But more than that, they also help build a more cohesive and believable universe. Nearly every NPC in the game can merge Kinstone pieces, which prompts you to talk to everyone to see if they can merge. Through merging, these characters started to feel like actual people. You're able to learn each character's personalities, goals, likes and dislikes, and some Kinstone pieces actually affect how certain characters act. This is so refreshing because too many games out there have NPCs that have absolutely nothing interesting to say, and it can make the player feel disconnected from the game's world. Hyrule Town is especially memorable. It's bustling with energy and every character has an interesting story to tell. My favorite is probably the guy who runs the gambling minigame, because he's basically a personification of your conscience screaming at you not to gamble all your money away. But you do anyway, because you have no self-control. The only problem with Kinstones is that almost every side quest is completed through merging. It's not the most irritating thing in the world, but if you end up going for 100% completion, it can get a little grindy and repetitive. And that brings me to my second and final flaw, 100% completion. Hey, check it out! I'm at the final boss and I have 19 heart containers. Well, that's quite a few, but why stop there? After all, everyone knows that Zelda games normally cap out at 20 heart containers, so what's the deal? This motherfucker. The figurine shop is a cool little area in Hyrule Town that lets you trade mysterious shells for figures that you can keep on display in game. On their own, they're harmless little collectibles that give you some extra information, but there are a lot of them. 130 to be exact. Now, just take a guess as to how you get the last heart piece in the game. I won't waste your time explaining exactly how the percentage system works, but just know that you will need thousands of shells to get each figure. I spent literal hours getting one figure at a time, slowly crawling my way to number 130, only to run out of shells at about the 100 mark because, spoiler alert, the amount of shells you can carry caps at 999. Which I didn't know. And I had probably found over 10,000 shells in the game at this point. But they all disappeared into the void once I got to 999. In order to get the remaining figurines, I was going to have to either grind shells or rupees, and I just didn't want to do that for a heart piece. Come on, come on. Damn it! I already have 6 Wall Masters. Give me something I don't have. Jeez. This must be what it's like to play a gacha game. But that's not all I missed. The Light Arrow quest can only be completed at a very specific time during the game. After the Temple of Droplets, but before you access the Cloud Tops, you can trade Kinstones with one of the Sky Folk in Hyrule Town. This will open a teleporter to a house you can't access at this point without trading with this specific character. In the house, you'll find a ghost haunting this dude, and you can use the Gust Jar to suck up the ghost, and he'll give you the light arrows. But if you go to the Cloud Tops area before completing this quest, it's impossible to get them, and that's what happened to me. Which sucks because light arrows are so ridiculously powerful. And last, the Mirror Shield quest isn't available until after you have already beaten the game. So, like, what's the point? These quests aren't game breakers and are actually very minuscule in the grand scheme of the game, but I was so disappointed when I couldn't collect every item, because I just love doing that shit. But hey, I don't want to end this video on a negative note, so before I finish, let's talk about the ending. After Vaati's defeat, Eslo and Zelda help seal him away and restore Hyrule to its former state. Eslo turns back into his Minish form and says his goodbyes, and this hit me really hard. His dialogue here is some of the best in the game, and it actually had me tearing up a bit. The whole ending sequence ties up the game's story so neatly with its theme of accepting help from the people around you, and I loved it. So, did I convince you? Is Minish Cap underappreciated? Is it a top 5 Zelda game? I think it is. Whether you enjoy this series for its fun gameplay or for the story, characters, or music, Minish Cap, as IGN says, has a little something for everyone. I wanted to make this video as someone who pushed it off for such a long time. This game is a must-play for anyone who even remotely enjoys this series. But at the end of the day, it's all a matter of opinion. So let me know in the comments what you think of Minish Cap, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.